Nessus can be used for doing penetration testing. Specifically, it's a network vulnerability scanner. And it'll look for known vulnerabilities in software. It does some web-based checks, but I wouldn't rely on it for any type of web-based thing. So don't think that just because you run it on your network that any type of open web application is going to be secure, because that's just not the thing. And look for known exploits in Metasploit, and actually try them on your network. You'll see I mentioned a couple of other vendors here. Canvas, which we've got the VOIP pack for Canvas, which works very well, and Core Impact. Core Impact doesn't necessarily have, I don't think that they have VOIP things, but they're pretty good. So excuse me. It's really cliche that security is only as good as the weakest link, but it's so true. And one of the things that we see all the time in security is vendors will claim that something's a feature, while at the same time it's a weakness. And I wish that more vendors would understand that, sometimes a weakness that they may consider a feature is bad enough that they should probably forego that feature. All right, and so some examples of things with of weak security. All right, and I've been told that I can't mention any type of vendors, which is probably good. So no sudo password needed. I see this one all the time. All right, and although sudo runs as root all the time, being able to just sudo to root without a password is essentially really bad. The reason why a lot of people may not understand that, the reason why is because if you have a web user that has sudo access and can get to root, anyone that manages to get a execution from that web application is then capable of getting root on your system. It becomes a big issue. And there's other things that you can do for doing privilege escalation. So it's really something that does need to be fixed. There's a web-based configuration. I really think that people need to protect their web-based configuration, so I've put it in here. There's no secondary validation of risky actions. One of the things that we see quite often is that cross-site scripting it can be a big problem. With a lot of web applications, cross-site scripting will allow you to initiate any type of request to it that you want to, including installing modules that allow you to get access to the asterisk AMI and then execute commands on the system. So it's a serious problem. Backup accounts with default passwords. There's at least one and probably more vendors that have backup accounts because they like to help out their customers. The passwords for it are defaulted. Most people don't actually know to change it. Okay. No OS hardening. Normally, whenever you're installing a system out on the internet, you really need to go about hardening the OS. Now, hardening the OS means removing services that are unneeded. Okay, and configuring and really making sure that the permissions are right. Configuration files owned by the same user as the server executable. This is one that you see all the time, and unfortunately, in some ways it's needed because of the process, but if your server executable gets exploited so that it's capable of executing commands, there's nothing keeping somebody from overwriting your configuration files and then causing you more problems. So, and finally, no encryption. And the amazing thing is that there's no encryption used, and we're not just talking about the network and transport encryption, but there's no encryption for the passwords and text files, and looks like there's another error here, but one of the things that I really wish that people would get to doing is to protecting passwords and text files. And sometime I hope to have enough time that I can actually help out with this problem. So, all right. So things that you can do to fix it, and hopefully a lot of these other pages go a lot faster. But there's setting only use the all equals no password in sudo when it's absolutely needed. Every now and then you'll have an application that you actually need that in because of the way that it works and the way the authentication goes. If you can, use expect, which will allow you to actually issue what you need to in order to get past the authentication. There's some problems with that, of course, being that you're essentially programming your authentication into a script. But it's better than just allowing anyone access to the sudo root. Protecting your configuration URLs, the configuration services. If you've got web applications that are out there, I highly recommend making it so that you bind to the local host and only allow access to them via SSH. Once if you were to start doing that, you'd see that a lot of your attacks would drop off. All right. Make sure you change all your passwords, remove the unneeded services, force the use of encryption. I probably should have put TLS there, but one of the things I should probably mention is that there's a lot of people that have gone to believing that VPNs are the end-all of making sure that something is secure, and unfortunately, VPNs in a lot of ways are just treating the problem. And I say that because I actually have written some exploits that wait for somebody to hop on a VPN and then target them inside the VPN. So don't leave a configuration open files owned by the same user. And like I said, that one may take some work by vendors. Okay. One of the things is bad architectural decisions. And this happens all the time. I can't tell you the number of times that I see this, no firewalls. Now, everybody would think that, you need to have at least some kind of firewall, right? But a lot of times, because of problems that people have had with natting or other issues, they'll put things out there without being behind a firewall. And although I'm somewhat guilty of this as well, I'm known to put something out on the internet behind a firewall, but it's usually when I'm actually looking at picking up something malicious. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've actually gotten 0 days just because I leave something out there and wait for someone to get it. Right? So there's misuse of VPNs. Like I was saying, VPNs, there's good things about them and bad things about them. You can't really rely on them all the time. You need to actually understand what you're doing with a VPN and why you're using it. The protocols, not all protocols are equal. Okay, no use of session border controllers and application gateways. If you're looking at a large network, the session border controllers or application gateways, essentially, so when I say application gateway, an application gateway originally was a type of firewall that actually knew the protocol and would actually speak the protocol to a very standard thing. And it wouldn't allow an attacker to attack things that were inside of your network using a non-standard protocol. It would only allow things that it knew were safe. And finally, there's non-standard ports and standard ports. Now, at least one vendor has a habit of putting a non-standard port out there while they have a standard port as well. Some people think that that's great for a backup purpose in case you need to get access to it. But the unfortunate thing is that myself is a good example. I didn't actually know that there was a non-standard port running for quite some time. I thought that I had locked down my port 80. I thought I was safe for probably about 8 months until I got pwned, and then I realized that there's another web application port running on 9090. So, and yeah, I'll readily admit that I've had my systems breached. I've picked up 0 days. I'm like some others here that build honeypots, VoIP honeypots. So. One of the things that people do wrong about security all the time is, they don't consider the security at the beginning of the project. When you're laying down the architecture of the network, they don't really consider it, and so they're kind of doing it after the fact. And when you do it after the fact, you may get some of the issues, but architectural design issues with security get very expensive to fix, and it can take quite some time. Okay, one of the things that I wish more people would do, or at least even know how to do, is to map out attack vectors. Now, an attack vector is essentially a way that any method that an attacker can use for getting into your system, and it could be any open port, any type of input to services, and any way in which somebody could possibly attack your system, and that includes human. A lot of times, here's a good example. I was doing some social engineering testing for a large company that had a phone system, and I actually got their help desk to change the password to the voicemail for the VP. All I did is call up and say I was that guy. They didn't know verification. So, consider how security affects each device. If you're putting a device on your network, how secure is it? How do you know it's secure? Have you tested it? So, all right, trust issues. How many people out here put extensions? How many people out here create extensions but never really look at changing the context or anything like that? Because I know at least a few people in this room that have created extensions, had people get access to those extensions, and had things get rather expensive. I mean, this is something the bad guys are using all the time. You create an extension, they find the password, and it's not always the extension. You'll see it's trunks too. Sometimes they'll actually break into somebody that you're connected to. The trunk, of course, has got a trusted relationship with you, and they can use that trunk for dialing through your system. So there's one person in the room that had a problem with that. I think they were dialing, I think it was like 1,800 calls an hour, something like that. Yeah. Users. Flash operator panel. Flash operator panel is, I probably shouldn't have actually mentioned that either, since they're essentially kind of a vendor. But it's, yeah. But they're there's sensitive information on that. If you have that on your system, make sure that you protect it, because somebody that connects to that, if it's open and they connect to it, they can see what your extensions are, and then they have a lot more attack vectors towards attacking you, and not just extensions. I mean, you get that, you'll find out about conferences and some certain groups of telephony hackers, freaks. They absolutely love conferences. They'll set up conferences and run them for weeks. So they don't do that nearly as often anymore. But web users with too much authority, a lot of people never go about modifying the default authority. Most of the time, the authorization defaults to everything, and it usually doesn't need to. Okay, basic authentication, and this is an interesting one. I put it here as a trust issue, just because people are just pretty much trusting the protocol. But basic authentication can be reversed, and every web request that you make in which you're using a basic authentication, it essentially passes your password over the wire. So if it's not encrypted, somebody can easily get that and reverse it and then get into your system. And finally, there's caller ID. There's access to voicemail from caller ID. Spoofing caller ID is really easy, and seeing hidden callers is usually easy too. Now, there's a really actually funny story about this one. So my wife works for Verizon.